back to last class, yes, you need to be OSHA certified for a forklift, but to be certified on the actual Genie lift, the way you guys will have your so-called certification is it's going to be a verbal training with one of the shop staff here, faculty or staff. They will have you get in the actual lifts and they will walk you through on how to run the actual lift. And once you've become comfortable on that lift, then you will have the ability to use it with permission. Doesn't mean you can jump on it at any point, but that means when it's time to use the lift and we need someone to get on it, if you've been trained on it, you could ask one of us and go, hey, can I be the one that's using the lift? Yes, you've been trained on it, you can go ahead and do it. On slower periods is when we would actually go ahead and train you guys on that lift. But there is no official OSHA certification for you guys to get certified for the lift. That's only the forklift. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We'll go over another PowerPoint talking about the boards. So before I get to the board, we'll talk about the power distribution. So our boards are connected to the power distribution, which is our dimmers, which are connected to all of our circuits where our fixtures are plugged into. So that's how we power everything with the dimmer, and then we control it with the actual board for lighting. Now, each one of our dimmers is going to be a 20 amp breaker, so that circuit. And we are working on a 120 volt system. So according to this, I wrote dimmer power, we have 2400 watts or 2.4 kilowatts for each one of our dimmers. So that circuit that we can plug into. And where do I get that number, 2400 watts? So we're working on a 20 amp breaker and we're on a 120 volt system. So you've probably heard this if you've had lighting with Tony. So we would use our West Virginia formula to figure out how many watts we have. And I call it West Virginia because it looks like the W for West equals VA, which is watts equal volts times amps. So a sample here, how would I get my watts? So I'm on a 120 volt system using a 20 amp breaker. So if I multiply these two together, that's where I'm getting that 2400 watts per dimmer or per circuit. So I can hook up that many watts in that lamp fixture to each one. That's why we can twofer items. If you've heard that before, we can plug two different fixtures into that same dimmer and use them together without popping that breaker. So we can go up to that 2400 watts. The first board I'm going to go over is the one that's in DM150, and that's Studio Theater. And a 2-scene preset is going to let you feel out that show. It'll have labels on this, so it'll tell you what each one of these sliders can control. And you'll be able to go back and forth between 2 scenes. So you can set up 2 scenes, and then you can have a fade in between them to work on a show. Now, this is the actual board that's in DM. So it's a manual 2-scene preset board. And it'll have, the console will have 2 rows of preset of faders. Now, the faders are each one of these sliders. Don't get it confused with a soundboard. This is an actual light board. So it has preset A, so scene A up top, and I'll have 24 sliders here that will control 24 different channels in DM. So we have a dimmer pack in DM, a portable one, a small one, compared to our large ones that we have upstairs for the black box or main stage. So that little portable unit has 24 dimmers. That's why we have 24 channels here. Now, each one of these sliders may work one fixture or may work two fixtures because we can twofer. Remember, because we can go up to that 2400 watts. So up here I have scene A, there's 24 sliders that I can control those 24 channels in DM. And down below, scene B works the same exact channels with the same exact sliders down here. Now in the middle in DM, there's gonna be a label strip in there that will have some initials that'll tell you what's downstage right, downstage left, downstage center, upstage center. It may say top light or top upstage, top downstage. So all those abbreviations are gonna be right in line with each one of these channels. So you can tell, what do I want to light on stage for this particular scene? Then I can go ahead and move those sliders that I want for that specific scene and have it set for possibly scene A, and it's all ready to go. I have that look ready. Now to control going from scene A to scene B are going to be these two masters down here. So depending on if I have both masters at the bottom, if I have both masters at the bottom, I'm going to be in scene B. How do I know that? Because I'm at 0% for scene A, and I'll be in 100% power for scene B. If I move both these sliders up together at the same time, it will fade out B because, as you see, the slider goes up, it goes to 0 on B, and the slider goes up to 100% on A. So I'll be fading out of B into A. So I could have something already preset in A and preset in B for different looks. And when I slide these two sliders at the same time, it'll be bringing out one channel or scene B while bringing up scene A, and vice versa. If I was in scene A with both sliders at the top and I slid them both together down, it would fade out of A and bring up B. Now, when we walk into DM, in order to turn this board on, there'll be a power switch on the back side of this unit on the top right. So there'll be a power switch to turn it on, and then you'll be able to control this board. Now, also there's a button here on the lower right. It's going to be a blackout button. If that button is lit up, you won't have any control at all with the board. You'll have to hit that button to turn off the light and have full control of the board. But say during the show, you need a quick blackout during the show, that would also be the button I would press to make everything go black out on stage. There's some other buttons in here for some advanced features, like there's fade times, scene change times in here, but you won't need to use that for the basic usage of this board. You'll just be able to change from scene A to scene B and back and forth using these two master faders. This is a sample cue sheet that you would use for DM150. So say I want to set up for a show. This is my 2-scene preset cue sheet. I can label my show. And for the top of show, for the first scene, I can have A set up with these sliders at between 1 through 10. So this is at half, because 5 is right in the middle between 1 and 10. Then maybe I have channels 11 and 13 all the way up to 9, and channel 17 at 7. Now, while I'm in scene 1, I could be setting all of the sliders here for scene 2, which is scene B, to these channels, to this intensity on each channel. And when I'm ready to go from scene 1 into scene 2, I would take those two master faders and go from both of them at the top, slide them together down to the bottom, and that would take out A and bring up B. Now, if you needed this form, you could ask it for me. I can email you the form if you have a show going on there. That way you would have a cue sheet set up where you can write this out. And if you are the one designing the show, you would be the one making out the cue sheet, and you'd be able to hand it off to the lightboard operator during the show, and they can follow this as they go along. So once you're in scene A, you could go ahead and set up B. Then once you slide into scene 2 and you're in B, now you could go back to scene 3 and preset your A while the show's going on in scene 2. And when you're ready to go to scene 3, you would slide both of those sliders again to the top to get back into scene A. So that lightboard operator has a lot more going on with a 2-scene preset board rather than one of the boards in the black box or the main stage, where it's usually set up in queues, and that lightboard operator, all they're doing is hitting the button go. So this one's more involved. Takes more focus to be ready for each one of these scenes. So before going on to that Ion, have any of you worked with that 2-scene preset in DM? Okay. So you guys have a good idea of what's going on. I've seen a lot of your cue sheets over there. You guys like handwrite everything. So it's so much easier to use a pre-made cue sheet like what I just showed you, and you can write everything down and hand it off to someone rather than going, I hope you can read this in my handwriting, and you guys try to control that board. Look like you might want to say something, Lo.
No, I really didn't want to say anything other than if you're planning on doing a BFA senior project or doing new plays or directing your own play in DM, this is the board you'll be working with. And more often than not, somebody that you're working with will have to know how to work the 2-scene. So if you know how to work it, it's better than anything, especially for your own senior projects.
Right, and sometimes that stage manager in that space does multiple things. They're not just calling the show. That stage manager may also be running that
Right.
light. So that's something a stage manager should know once they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to add, Jordan? I saw you clicked on. No? Okay. Now, here's something that's important in DM 150. You're not allowed to go out into the house and start moving lights. So those lights are already set up in a rep plot. So that it's set up and all the areas have been aimed at and taken care of according to the board. So you guys should not move anything, especially without permission. When senior projects do come around, yes, there's usually 3 or 4 lights that are put there specifically for the seniors that they can refocus. But that would only be with permission and a pre-setup with Tony and Lo to have that done. Otherwise, don't go in there and don't move any of the lights, because it's set up in a way that if we have like a guest speaker, or sometimes we do rent out DM, that rep plot is all set and ready to go for someone just to walk in and use that light plot. Any questions? No? Okay. So we'll go back and talk about the Ion. So this is the board that you guys use in the Light Lab. You would use in the black box if we're running a show, or on main stage running a show. ETC makes different boards. This one is a very popular one out in the professional world. So you may come run across this if you do work in a professional house. And this is the main board of the Ion. That secondary board in the picture with the faders here on the right, That is an add-on buy. So when you originally buy the Ion, you only get the one with all the buttons, the control board. It costs extra to grab that wing fader with all those sliders on it. So the main board here is going to have some very important buttons that you will need to know for basic use. Say you're going to come in and you're the light board operator, not necessarily a programmer or a designer, but the person that's going to be operating a board for a show. So one of the first things you want to know is these two buttons up here can be used for programming, but when you're ready to run a show, you're going to be in this button here, live. So there's a live button and a blind button. And you can program, if you're a programmer, in either of these screens. Either you're in live mode or blind mode. But when you're running the board, you should probably be in the live section. When you're setting up for the top of show, you should know this button here. It's going to say go to queue button, which is right there. You would end up hitting go to queue. I would hit the number 1 and then the enter button, and that would place me in queue 1. So I'm ready to run a show. To go to the next queue, if I'm running a show by queues, I would be able to just hit this button right here that says go. Now, every time I hit go, it would go to the next programmed queue. So maybe I have a show with 100 queues. So each time I hit go, it'll move forward 1 to the next queue, to the next queue. If I make a mistake while running a show, I can hit this button here, which will stop. And then I hit it again, it'll go back. So say I'm supposed to be in Q3, but by accident, I hit the go button twice and I ended up in scene 4 or Q4, I could stop and go back into Q3 if I needed to. Just like the 2-scene preset board, there's a blackout button. If the blackout button is lit up, that means you're not going to have any control of any of the buttons here. You can type all the buttons in, but nothing's going to pop up if I'm in blackout. So you want to make sure this blackout button's off also while running the board. Some other important buttons, you're going to have the sub button, a cue button here, and a record button. So if I needed to actually program something, I would need to know where these buttons are. And I would need to know how to pull up a channel. So in order to pull up a channel, there is no channel button. So I don't hit like channel 1, the button down here at full. There's no channel button. I would just hit the number. So if I hit 1 at full, it would bring up channel 1. Same as if I hit 100 at full, that would be channel 100. So if I wanted to pull up, say, channel 1 and channel 100 at full, and then have it programmed as a cue, I would hit record, the cue button, and say, I'm ready for my very next cue is going to be 10. So it'd be record, cue, 10, enter. And that's after I've pulled up the channels to that intensity I want. Now I'd be able to hit enter, and now I've made a new cue. If I want to take everything out that's programmed in the board, I would go back to that go to queue button. I would hit go to queue at out. So no matter what I have programmed, it would take out all lights at that point and bring me back to 0. Then I would have to go back and load a queue. So I'd have to go to queue and say, I want Q10 to start first. I'd go to queue, hit 10 for 10, enter, and it would pull up the board in Q10. Now there's another way to run this board, which is going to be kind of similar to that 2-scene preset, and that's going to be recording subs. So instead of running a show on cues, I could have different subs programmed, And the subs are going to be that additional wing fader right here with all of these sliders. These all can be used as submasters. So I can program different looks on stage and use it in this wing fader rather than having a cue board set up. Now, when we run rentals, we will have usually all of these sliders programmed in different looks. So it's easy to change different looks for a renter. A few renters we have a little deal with, like Roxy. Roxy Theater, we'll let them come in, and with these faders, we can give them different looks. And from the faders, we could go ahead and use that instead of pulling up individual channels to record a cue, and we could actually record different cues for a show, for a Roxy show. But basically, these sliders we would use for rentals or a simple show. And to record a sub is the same way we would record a cue. So I can punch in different channels, say I want channel 1 at full, channel 2 at full, channel 3 at full, and maybe those are the 3 channels I want to record a sub on. Then I would come over here and hit record sub 1, enter. Now, once I do that, I'm going to have to come over here to the fader board, and I would hit these 2 buttons at the same time, and it would lock this first slider as Submaster 1. And that will control channel 1, 2, and 3 I just programmed at full to this one slider. So now I don't have to type all that in. I could just come over to the slider and run that slider up, and that would control those 3 channels I had up when I hit record sub 1. Now, these submasters can be programmed with different looks, like a blue top light, a red top light, a downstage light, a center stage special. So all these different sliders can be labeled as well to tell us what they would do on stage. So we'd have submasters 1 through 10 here. We'd have 11 through 20, 21 through 30, and then 31 through 40 here. So I have 40 different submasters I can program and label to run a show. Now that's the basics of what you would need to know just to get a show up and running. If you were to use intelligent light, like if you already took your lighting course and you've used the light lab, then you can use this LED screen with all these additional buttons to help pull up different addresses and program different intelligent light, even if you're working with different LEDs or moving heads. You would be able to do that and change the parameters with these wheels up top. So these wheels would be assigned with the fixture you pulled up in the program to change the LED color, or have a moving head move from left to right or right to left or up and down. But that's an advanced feature. That's something you would need to be in the room with me for me to show you, then rather than use a PowerPoint. Here's something else you may come across if you are running a board for a designer or running a board for a show. These are called magic sheets. Now, magic sheets can take slightly different forms, but they're all going to be used in the same fashion to quickly find and locate those different lights that you have programmed on different channels on different areas of the stage. The sheet here on the left has repeated ground plans of each show. So this is the same show ground plan on each one, but I have different channels written down, and they're highlighted in the color that they would be used on stage. So these would be all the light fixture channels of blue on this stage. As well, this would be all the lavender channels where the lights are focused on stage. So if I needed a lavender light upstage right, far upstage as I could go, I would be able to visually locate channel 30 is going to give me that lavender light way upstage right. As well as I need a down center blue light. On the magic sheet, I would be able to look at the little stage where all my blue light is and see channel 3 is going to give me that downstage center light. So I would be able to visually locate that light quickly and be able to pull it up for that designer. Say they're getting ready to program a new cue, a new look. This is how the designer would also locate those channels they need, as well as amber front light, top light here, that down light. They would be able to locate it quickly with this magic sheet. Now, a different version here is just going to be used in an Excel sheet, and all of the channels are going to be in the same area that they would be on stage for each one of these sections. So this is a repeated pattern for the stage, the locations on stage, and it'll have the color and location front warm light here. And then I would have another warm color here, warm, cooler colors. And I would be able to locate, so I want that orange color down center. Again, I could go, okay, well, what's down center here? So 133, I'd be able to pull up that channel quickly on the magic sheet because I can visually see I need that orange down center and pull up that channel quickly. So this would be a magic sheet to help me locate those colors quickly and be able to make the process of programming a show go much faster. Here's another version of a magic sheet. So you can see the direction of the light, the area that the channel would control, and the color bar above of what color that would actually pull up. So this is just another version of how that magic sheet can work. So each designer may make their own version of a magic sheet, but in the essence, they all work the same. They'll tell you the color, the direction, and give you a number for where that area of that channel is on stage that you can quickly pull it up and be able to give a new look for that particular portion of the show. I'll stop sharing for a second. Hopefully you guys are following along. It's a lot of information, but you can always go back and review as well. Anything you guys want to add before I go on to sound?
Yeah, the Ion is probably the most used light board around next to the Element. You'll find other boards as well, but like in a typical theater house, especially in South Florida, you'll find a lot of Ion. So if you get good at that board, you can pretty much find work anywhere you go. Anywhere that I've said, hey, I want to do light work for you guys, the first thing they ask is, do you know how to run the board? We're kind of at like a shortage of light board ops in South Florida. There's not that many that can run the Ion proficiently. And if you get good at it, then your chances of getting hired go way up. And the Ion has a complete like learning class on YouTube for free. So you can just learn how to become really good at programming with the Ion and the Element as well on YouTube for free.
And when he says Element, that's also an ETC brand. So the programming language that you're learning, like record sub channels and everything, that language is going to be the same for ETC. So when you learn on one ETC brand, you're going to know the other as well. There's a couple other boards out there that you may come across. If you work on a cruise ship, they're using a different thing altogether. They're using a whole hog because that's actually an integrated board that can control automation as well. Our Ion can control visuals and control audio as well, but we don't use it that way. But on cruise ships, yeah, they use that whole hog because they're using presentations through that light board and automation too. And automation is like things drop, curtains drop, things open up automatically, pneumatic doors and such. So that board can control multiple features all at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into sound. This board here that I have on the slide, this is the board that's in the black box. It's going to be an Allen and Heath mixer board, and this is going to be an analog mixing board. Now, in the professional world, you may come across digital boards as well. Also, if you go over to the music department, they have a digital board in their booth. I'm using analog here in the black box on main stage and in DM150. We do have a digital board, but I find it easier to train everyone on this because once you've understood this, it's a much quicker learning curve to move to a digital board. You just have to be able to change pages and such. But if you understand this board, you could easily understand a digital board. This board's gonna have different parts to it. So at the top here, I'm gonna have inputs. This slide's pretty dark, but this is the XLR cable, that microphone cable we can plug right in, right here. So if I wanted to plug a microphone, I can plug a microphone in here. I can plug speakers into this. Also, right below the XLR inputs right here, these are TRS. TRS is a 1/4 inch cable, just like an 1/8 inch cable would be to plug into a laptop or another phone that's not an iPhone. But these would be the 1/4 inch size. So I could use either that TRS tip, the 1/4 inch, or an XLR to have an input go into the board. And I would have outputs over here. These outputs would go to speakers. So I have my main speakers here, as well as auxiliaries. These are outputs. So if I want to plug in the speakers, they'd go here. If I want to plug in my inputs, they would be over here. Now, these sliders down here at the bottom are going to individually control whatever I plug in straight up at the top and that input. So right up here, I'd be able to control that whole line from this first channel. Also on this first channel, I'm going to have my overall volume control here, the gain. So this, I would be able to adjust, and I would always adjust this to where I wrote unity line. It's going to be this heavy line that goes across right here, and it'll say 0. So in collaboration with that overall volume here, the gain, I would control that till I get the best volume that I want to hear with the slider at 0. So when someone new walks in to use the board, they would automatically pull that slider to the best position, which would be that you've already used to this unity line here. Now, if they need to go louder, there's a little bit of room here for them to go a little bit louder, but there's also plenty of room for them to make it softer down here, lower the volume. But I would use, again, that overall gain to set my preset here at unity here in the middle. Now, right below this gain volume, I'm going to have these 4 knobs, which is my equalizer. So my equalizer is going to be my EQ. So I'm going to have my high-end noise, like my treble, and then the lower button is going to be my lower end, the bass. And then I'll have some frequencies in the middle that it'll allow me to control a little bit as well. Some mid-range frequencies in the EQ. And our voices fall somewhere here in the middle of the EQ. And then again, treble on the top, bass on the bottom. So I can control that quality of the sound that's coming in from that input that now I'm transferring to this output to the speakers. So I'll be able to control the quality of what that is right here. These knobs right here below the EQ are going to be auxiliaries. And the auxiliaries I can use as extra outputs. and that's going through an auxiliary bus. And these can be individually controlled. Say I've added additional speakers, or maybe one of these auxiliaries is now going to a musician out on stage that's controlled separately than the regular house sound. So maybe I have a guitar amp through one of these. So that would be plugged in differently. The last knob here at the bottom is going to be the pan to control that input. Do I want it panned to only the left side? Do I want it panned all the way to the right? Or do I have it straight up at 12 o'clock in the middle? So I have it playing through both left and right speakers. That's what the pan would be. The button below that is going to be mute. So if I want to mute that entire channel or turn it back on, I can. The one in the black box is actually opposite of this button. This button is an actual mute button, which will mute. The one in the black box says on. So you actually have to push the button to turn it on. And if the button's not lit up and pushed down, it's in mute in the black box. And then you have the slider itself to control each one of the individual channels. Something also you want to know is the master volumes over here. If the master volume is at 0, nothing will work on your board. So you want to make sure your master volumes are also at about unity to begin with. So you'd want that there. Here at the bottom where it says label, this is a space available that we would use an additional piece of, it's called board tape, that we can write on and then take up for a new show and put down another piece of board tape. And we would label everything that's set up for this particular board across this labeling at the bottom. So maybe the first one might say God mic. Then you might have a second section that says program sound. Then you might have another one that says guitar. So depending on what your show's set up for, each channel can be assigned and given to something new. Everyone should know the God mic is for the stage manager to talk to everyone during tech. Also to talk to people backstage during an actual production. You don't want the God mic talking in the house when you have an audience, but it would be set up for backstage that way. When I said program sound, say in theory, I have the second one set up for program sound. You guys know what I'm talking about when I say program sound? I'll wait for someone to answer.
No, I was about to ask that.
Anyone want to help them out? Okay. Program sound is going to be all of your sound that's being piped backstage. So it's going to be in the green room. It'll be in the dressing rooms. It'll play in the costume shop and the scene shop and in the lobby. So program sound is going to be anything that's on stage, you'll be able to hear, even in the restrooms, you can hear backstage. So program sound is going to be a microphone that's hung somewhere above the stage. We have one hung right in the middle of the black box from the grid. And on main stage, we have a microphone hanging off the front catwalk pointed towards the stage. So anything that plays out of a speaker would be picked up by that microphone, or actors speaking or singing on stage would be picked up by that microphone. And that microphone would be plugged in right here as an input, and I would be able to turn that microphone on here with a program sound slider, and anything played there, I have assigned probably to an auxiliary bus here that will control the speakers backstage. So in the green room, the dressing rooms, the restrooms, the lobby. And I would be able to turn this on. So when there's crew members or actors waiting backstage in the wings, they can hear the show and know where they're supposed to be coming up. As well as if people had to use the restroom or they're particularly in the lobby, not in the show yet, they can hear the show happening before they walk into the actual audience or on stage.
I was just going to add, Chris, that also allows the stage manager to utilize the God mic to the backstage areas without the audience hearing places or 5-till, whatever her command or his commands are.
Yes, absolutely. Now, when we use this in the black box, this yellow slider here in the black box is going to be able to control a different channel, which is the backstage. And it'll have 2 buttons up here that'll say main and the secondary channel. So I would turn off, just like the mute button, I would hit that button to turn off the main channel for the program sound and God mic. So it wouldn't play in the house, it would only play backstage, because this would be my secondary channel backstage, and then the mains would control everything in the house. Now, that's the overall of this board. Is going to be similar to your board in DM. So they're both set up very similar. One's an Allen and Heath, and I think one's a Mackie. They're just 2 different name brands, but they'll have the same parts: the inputs, the overall gain, the EQ, auxiliaries, and your slider, mute buttons. All will be the same, just they might be a different color, but they all operate the same between the black box and DM. Now, this board is very similar to our board on main stage. This one actually doesn't have as many channels as the one we have on main stage. So some people might feel a little bit overwhelmed when they walk in and see all of these knobs and all of these sliders. But all it is just additional channels that we can assign to control what's happening out on stage. Now, our board, the way it's set up, so we'll have this whole left side here that I can control individual channels that I want, say, on main stage. So if we're doing a musical, say on a musical, we might have 14 different wireless mics out on stage. That's why I have the ability with all of these channels, so I can assign a different wireless mic to each actor on this board. So I have more opportunities to assign different things on this particular board. So all the different channels are going to work the same way as the small board, same as the pan button, same as the auxiliaries. I just have more auxiliaries that I can assign. The EQ is going to work the same as the small board. I just have more options. Same master gain, same inputs. So it's going to work in that same way as the smaller board. I just have more opportunities. And on main stage, yes, we have the bigger board because occasionally we do a musical. We also do a lot of rentals where they come in and use the different wireless mics for the different actors to do musicals. And there's also going to be a slider on this side that will be assigned as an MP3 player. So you can plug your phone or a laptop and play music out on stage, as well as a slider that'll say program sound, just like the smaller board. On the label line, everything will be labeled across. Sometimes I have floor mics preset out there, so we can just walk in and use floor mics to help amplify voices out on stage. But here we teach our actors to use their own voice, unless we're doing a musical, for projection. So we won't use the reinforcement unless it's a musical for you guys. But also, if we're doing a musical, some of these sliders would be assigned to our orchestra. So I might have to amplify some of the musical instruments that would be in our pit. So I can assign a microphone, maybe I have placed on a drum set, again, on a guitar amplifier. One might be plugged into a synthesizer, a keyboard downstairs in the pit. But I can control all of these with different channels on the larger board for main stage. Again, over here are our master volumes. If your master volume is at 0, nothing over on this side will work at all. So you want to make sure these master volumes are at unity when controlling them. Now there's additional buttons here, like these buttons here will be submasters. If I want to control multiple channels together at one time, I could assign them in here to these subs. So if I wanted channels 1 through 4 working together, I can assign it here. But that's more advanced feature, and you guys would be able to know what the individuals here. everything on the right side of our board on our main stage has been pre-patched and is plugged into something called an M-Track audio. Now what that is this is going to be patched into that piece of equipment that controls 8 different channels to 8 different speakers that I can plug in my computer for the sound laptop and control QLab automatically through that piece of equipment that's patched in here to those 8 channels that are playing into 8 different speakers. Let's see if I have it on the next page. Yes, okay. So this piece right here, which is in our sound rack on main stage, this is what we plug our computer into. And then this piece of equipment is interfaced into that board. So when I play cues in my QLab here, here's a sample QLab, it will play into those 8 different speakers, which now I can control by this program right here. I can control just through the program. I don't have to touch anything on the board because it's already been pre-patched and set. And I can assign it different speakers all through this program to program a show. And that's what a sound designer would end up doing. So after the sound designer has placed all their sound cues and effects in, they would be able to assign it where they want it playing out on stage by going through this interface, which is already patched into the right side of our board with these 8 channels. Easy, right?